Good morning, everyone, and happy Monday. I'm your host, Shad Dales, and this is our latest TDR Cannabis in 5, presented by Dutchie. And here we go, a brand new week, and there's a lot of momentum that's building here in the cannabis space. So here are some key things to keep your eye on this week. With earnings season now behind us, it's best described that a lot of companies held their ground. They really showed a lot of resilience. So now the attention shifts obviously to Washington, and the one big question everyone is asking, will President Donald Trump announce rescheduling this week? And if so, when? Like I said, it could be this week, it could be 3 weeks. Either way, there are headlines that could move stocks. So let's set the table for what to watch between now and this Friday. Okay, let's first talk about what everyone was probably thinking a lot over the weekend. Many of you noticed a lot of the cannabis stocks rolled over going to the close on Friday, and that grabbed a lot of people's attention. But here's the thing, nothing changed fundamentally. The industry didn't weaken. What we saw was more about positioning than mechanics. MSOS, the cannabis ETF, was pushed under $5 right into options expiry. The biggest clusters were at the $4.50 and $5 strikes. By taking the ETF down through these levels, larger desks, especially in Toronto, they were able to protect their books and ensure retail buyers got squeezed. And we've seen this play out time and time again. And the data supports this. Short sell volume spiked just as expiry pressure peaked. As one trader put it, quote, they took it down under 5 to profit off the chain, as is tradition. But hear me out here. There's good news involved in this. With expiry now behind us, the shackles are off. Paired with an earnings season that held up, this feels less like a market failure and more like a market reset. In full disclosure, I am currently holding a position in Advisor Shares ETF MSOS. So that's the backstory. But here's what you need to pay attention to this week. Number one, no surprise, is the driver around rescheduling. Last week, Trump said the administration is looking at it, and that's a decision that could come in the next few weeks. And that is the clearest signal that we've seen yet. So this week, every Trump appearance matters. A presser remark, a fundraiser quip, it all moves markets. And don't forget the DEA or the DOJ. Any comment from them could spark the overall industry. But really outside of that, we need an announcement from Donald Trump. And like I said, it could happen this week, it could happen in 2 to 3 weeks, it could really happen at any given time. That is why there is so much attention and energy that's building momentum in this industry right now. So stay connected to that this week. And what do I say this and why does it matter? Because rescheduling, it isn't legalization, but it does remove a 280E tax pain. That kind of shift re-rates balance sheets across the industry. So really Washington, let's face it, is the main stage, but we also have to watch the periphery in all this. Let's now move to Congress, and normally we'd be paying close attention to it because of cannabis reform, but they're currently on recess until September 1. That means zero legislative movement will happen this week, so no bills, no amendments, and no banking chatter, which in return really sharpens the spotlight on the executive branch, aka an executive order. So to understand that, if something moves, it's going to come from the White House or agencies, not from Capitol Hill. So in the meantime, it's the states that provide the rhythm. With that, this week, states are front and center. Let's first look at Pennsylvania, and any adult use whispers matter because of its size and influence. Also in Texas, developments around hemp restriction and possible THC bans are reshaping investor thinking. There's a deadline session coming up, so a lot of outcome to be decided this week in Texas on what comes next. Then we've got North Carolina. Progress on medical could signal some momentum in the Southeast. And then in New York, every licensing cleanup reinforces confidence in regulated growth, and they need it right now in New York. Alone, let's face it, those headlines, they're not going to explode stocks or really move them, but collectively they reinforce the directional narrative, especially if you base around the whole rescheduling narrative involved in this. Another angle to watch is enforcement. When we see raids or seizures, say in California or New York, it's going to signal regulators are protecting the legal market, which we're seeing more and more of. That tends to benefit, obviously, these licensed operators, and that is a good thing. It's a quieter dynamic, but it's shaping sentiment, and the sentiment, again, is building. To now focus on the international market, what should you be keeping your eye on? Europe still matters, especially, obviously, in Germany. Q2 2025, Germany imported a record 41 tons of medical cannabis. That was nearly 5 times last year's volume, with more than 16 tons coming from Canada. Simultaneously, Germany's health ministry proposed restrictions like banning mail order deliveries and requiring in-person doctor visits. That, if enacted, could limit patient access, but what we continue to hear and see is that this will be modification, not scaling back on what already has been introduced to the German market. So that's a good thing. So keep in mind, here's the push and the pull. Explosive demand from import growth, but policy uncertainty is somewhat creeping in. Keep your eyes on Tilray, Aurora, Village Farms. These are all big Canadian LPs that continue to to export product into the German market. Also, don't forget corporate news either. Earnings may be done, but this is when we see a lot of 8Ks for refinancing, acquisitions, asset sales, and updates on store openings or wholesale deals, so keep your eye on that as well. These aren't often tickers and headlines, but they can move mid-caps under the radar. And speaking of radar, this episode is brought to you by Dutchie. It's the platform behind cannabis retail, from online menus to point of sale, payments, and delivery. If you run a dispensary or invest in them, Dutchie helps you scale smarter and stay compliant. Learn more at business.dutchie.com. Okay, with now so many moving parts involved in this industry, I want to move now to the media side of things. If CNBC or Bloomberg frame rescheduling as imminent instead of speculative, sentiment shifts. If they treat it as a public health or a research issue, not just pot stocks, it brings in a different audience. So the media tone is going to be really important. And speaking of media, make sure to log on today at 4 o'clock at our live stream, because CNBC's own Tim Seymour will join us on our latest Trade to Black live stream podcast. He's given the cannabis stocks a lot of attention over the last week and a half, so we're going to get his take on what we should be paying attention to and what we may be missing, and really how these stocks are viewed in the eyes of Wall Street right now. Even though something like safer banking is still not passed, still, it's got to be something that Wall Street is starting to pay more and more attention to in the event we do get rescheduling. So that is something we need to keep in mind as the media circle starts to get more involved and starts to report on this space right now. So to recap everything for the week, here is your roadmap. For Monday, check Trump's schedule. If he's in front of cameras, cannabis is a live question, so that's one thing to keep your mind on. Tuesday, track state news, committee calendars, or governor statements. That's something to be mindful of. Then Wednesday, midweek is a common window for policy trial balloons. If we get a teaser, this could be it. Then Thursday, watch for international updates from Germany or Italy, plus enforcement pressers. And then Friday, expect positioning for the weekend. Even a hint from Washington could load the tape, and silence may see some cover. So bringing this all together, what's the big takeaway here? 1, the industry has the floor. Earnings prove companies are sturdier than expected. 2, the catalyst is simple. It's timing. We're waiting on a when, not an if, rescheduling gets announced. So keep your eye all on President Donald Trump this week. As we know, one sentence can change everything. 3, know the filters. Signal: Trump, DEA, state momentum, enforcement, and filings. Noise: unverified social chatter and recycled rumors. Stick to the signals and not the noise. We also want to outline to you some frequently asked questions that we get here at TDR. 1, does rescheduling equal legalization? The answer is no. It's relief from 280E and easier research access, so it's not full legalization. 2, if rescheduling gets delays, what then? Yes, you got to focus on the operators and lean balance sheets, but what we keep hearing right now is that there is a decision that's coming in the next few weeks. We're hearing a lot of positive momentum about an announcement, but what it actually entails, that's anyone's guess right now. So keep that in mind for what it's worth. And another important one, why do Canadian LPs move on US news? Why? Well, big funds buy themes. We've constantly seen this historically, the legacy names of Canopy and Tilray. They continue to move as we see more US government reform announced in the news. So keep that in mind. You also want to look at Village Farms, SNDL, companies like High Tide. They all trade on the NASDAQ right now. So as I said, big funds buy themes. When US stocks move, LPs tend to tag along. So don't forget about the Canadian LPs. The bottom line for all this week, watch Washington closely, track credible state enforcement news, monitor company filings, and remember, last week's dip looked like option expiry mechanics, not weakness. So remember that. All right, so you're now all set up for this week. So let's get to it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Make sure to stay connected. And as mentioned, got a full slate of great interviews coming up this week that'll give you more direction and education on what we can expect next out of Washington, and really how a lot of investors are preparing in the space right now. The stakes are high. So that's the latest on our TDR Cannabis in 5 presented by Dutchie. I'm your host, Shad Dales. So long, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching.